Good afternoon, Mr. Prime Minister. Thank you for this visit, dear journalists. Today, the Prime Minister of Slovakia is in Ukraine. We had a substantive conversation today. It is important that we have this dialogue. We will continue this dialogue. Mr. Prime Minister of Slovakia visited Uzhhorod not for the first time, but this is our first meeting here. We have to maintain a pragmatic attitude. It is important that this dialogue continues at the level of our ministers, at the level of our institutions, and not only at the level of our leaders. In particular, we agreed to hold an intergovernmental commission meeting in October. Today, we discussed the key topics: what is fundamental for Ukraine and what is fundamental for Slovakia. Yesterday, I informed President Trump about our dialogue. I also informed him about our cooperation with the leaders of the Coalition of Guards for Peace, the guarantee of security of Ukraine, and all our neighbours. The Russian aggression and attempts to destabilize the lives of Ukraine and other countries never end with Ukraine alone. We have to do everything so that the negative sides of history are not repeated, neither for Ukraine, nor for Slovakia, nor for other Central European countries. The Prime Minister told me about his contacts in China. We saw who was there, who spoke, how he behaved. It is important that Putin does not make such visits as an indulgence. There is no alternative to peace. We stand for peace, and we must end the war. Russia must do this as the only subject that started this war and, unfortunately, is dragging it out. We want peace in Ukraine. We rely on the support of our peaceful efforts. Robert assured that Slovakia will be with us and other partners in working for peace. We discussed the topic of security guarantees for Ukraine. It is good that Slovakia is ready to determine its position on this and is open to dialogue with us. Most of Europe is already in guarantees, and we are working with our partners. We think it would be right for Slovakia to be a part of the new security system. We also appreciate that Slovakia is ready to work with us in the format of the coalition of shelters. Thank you for this support. This is primarily about schools in Ukraine, kindergartens. We will be grateful for this support. It is important that our ministers provide the appropriate results. It is great that we have such a meeting, such an opportunity to discuss various issues, international issues. We hear from the United States how important the energy independence of Europe is for President Trump. We must respond to this, and it depends on everyone in Europe. Russian oil and gas have no future. If the United States continues to be so decisive, it will be a tangible change in the situation and a factor that will ensure that Russia will not fight. I would like to point out that Slovakia supports Ukraine in Russia, in the European Union. Thank you for this support. This is very important for us. The talks are ongoing. Ukraine deserves to open its clusters. We consider Ukraine's entry into the European Union as part of the security guarantees for us. It is positively received by heads of European institutions in European capitals and in Washington. We are supported very much. This is important. Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister, for supporting Ukraine's entry into the European Union. However, we see that Ukraine and Moldova must still move together to become a member of the European Union. It is equally important for bilateral cooperation in economic and infrastructure issues here, in our region, to strengthen our peoples and our countries. Today, the ministers raised the issue of trans-border movement. It is important to increase the potential of checkpoints on the border. We also value our cooperation for energy stability. We are talking about the import of electricity for Ukraine to meet the needs of our people in conditions of Russian strikes, missiles, and drones. We are also talking about the export of our energy resources through Slovakia to third countries. The more we work together, the better it will be for all of Europe. I am sure that this is not the only principle for Ukraine. We are ready to provide energy stability for Slovakia and other partners, and to have joint projects. We have only one principle, and that is non-Russian energy resources. And one more thing. Today, our railway workers' results are significant. I would like to congratulate them. A new part of the European network connects Uzhhorod with Bratislava, Košice, Budapest, and Vienna. This is just one of our first steps in the integration of Ukrainian railways into the EU network. We would like to thank everyone who worked on this project. This is a joint project with the EU. There are thousands of similar projects ahead. Ukraine will be a part of the EU. Thank you again, Mr. Prime Minister, for your visit. Glory to Ukraine.
Заява прем'єр-міністра Словацької Республіки Роберта Фіцо.
Шановний пане президенте, шановні пані та панове, хочу подякувати за запрошення на цю зустріч в Ужгороді. Я хочу підтвердити, що я був готовим взяти участь у саміті сусідів, який був запланований. І я також хотів використати можливість. Шановний пане президенте,
I have already spoken about it today. Now I will say it for the third time. First, I said it during our tête-à-tête meeting. Second, I spoke about it during our working lunch. Slovak-Ukrainian-Slovak relations are a good example of how different political points of view can sometimes overlap the importance of cooperation. If we look at pragmatic, rational cooperation between Slovakia and Ukraine, there are a lot of positive things. But, of course, if there are some different political points of view, they can be very often attractive for the media space, and they can overlap what we talked about today. Therefore, dear Mr. President, I really want to say that I am glad that we were able to talk to you tête-à-tête, and then during the summit, and we were able to explain some points to each other. Unfortunately, we could also rely on our certain points of view. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to tell you that we have different points of view on some topics. But this is how life is. And, Mr. President, I recalled that I was first elected to the Parliament in 1992. And since then, my political life has developed towards the sovereignty of foreign policy. Therefore, I believe, as I believe and hear Mr. President, that Mr. President also believes and hears me. What I think is important to remember today, after our victories, dear Mr. President, maybe sometimes it does not look like this on the basis of what goes on in the media or about the assessment of political decisions. But as the Prime Minister of the Slovak Republic, I wish that we had good, friendly relations between our countries, and that these relations were very high quality. I want to thank your government and your administration for taking care of the Slovak community, the Slovak national minority, and for maintaining all the rights that meet international standards. I wish not only good relations between Slovakia and Ukraine, dear Mr. President, but I also want to wish you good, just peace. I also want to wish you to make a decision as soon as possible while there is a guarantee of security. The Slovak Republic, as a small country, cannot play the most important role in this, but we support all initiatives that can lead to peace. Therefore, I, dear Mr. President, also agreed with your plan, which is called the Green Formula. I agreed on the peace plan, which was agreed by the Brazilians and the Chinese. I truly wish peace to this country, and above all, I wish you a good European perspective. Joining the European Union is, of course, related to a complex process that needs to be passed. I propose to the President all the experience that the Slovak government has, because before the process of joining, we made a lot of fatal mistakes. If we did not make these mistakes, our position in the European Union could have been even stronger, and it still is. Good, friendly relations between the countries, a real, just peace, and a European perspective. These are the moments that we want to wish within our relations, despite the fact that at some points our points of view are different. Dear Mr. President, I have made many important decisions in my life, and you make even more important decisions than I do, because your country is at war. I remember how we took the military from Iraq in 2007 because we were convinced that the war in Iraq began on the basis of false, fabricated evidence. I remember how we set up a quota for illegal migrants. Therefore, I am convinced that we cannot go astray in Slovakia in terms of the sovereignty of foreign policy, which is focused on all four world parties. We will not go astray, and we will not go astray. We will be proud and express our points of view on sovereignty. We are convinced that everyone has the right to protect their national interests. We have the right to protect ours, and we have the right to protect our national interests, and we have the right to respect each other. Yes, this thesis may not always be well received, but we cannot defend our national interests by harming someone else. Thank you, Mr. President, for the extensive discussion on the topic of energy, where our points of view are quite different. But the fact is that the potential of our energy cooperation is huge. We have already started it. We started during the first, second, and third talks, where our governments had talks, where we talked about expanding and increasing capacity for the expansion of our power and large-scale projects. There are also further projects that we are working on. I believe that the ministers of economy, who were present today, have a lot of work ahead of them. And I am very happy that during the next talks, it will be in our daily order. Dear Mr. President, I also think that it is very important to say that we have agreed to stay in touch. I want to say that everyone knows that I do not have a mobile phone, but it does not mean that we cannot stay in touch. If anything happens or something important happens, I will definitely propose that we stay in touch. I want to tell you that I want us to be able to explain everything to each other, because I will repeat myself again. We do have different points of view. But, dear Mr. President, I want to say that a good sign for the progress between our Slovak-Ukrainian, Slovak relations will be good if we manage to organize the fourth meeting of the Intergovernmental Commission. We propose to do it on October 20th. On the territory of the Slovak Republic. Our team is already preparing. The order is strange. We thank you for the practical proposals, for example, related to the airport in Uzhhorod. We believe that these are really very practical points that we can solve in the near future. We also believe that step by step, regardless of the different points of view, I want to say that the relations between Slovakia and Ukraine should still be of the highest quality. Dear Mr. President, thank you for this unique opportunity, because it was the first time we had the opportunity to talk to you like this. Before that, we could only shake hands during the meeting of the European Commission, but now we were able to meet in person. So, once again, thank you very much.
Пропозиції, наприклад, пов'язані із аеропортом в Ужгороді. Ми вважаємо, що це дійсно дуже практичні моменти, які ми можемо найближчим часом вирішити. Ми також віримо, що кроком за кроком, незважаючи на відмінні точки зору, і я хочу сказати, що взаємини між Словаччиною та Україною, вони все одно мають бути кращого, якіснішого, вищого характеру. Вельми шановний пане президенте, дякую вам за цю унікальну можливість, адже ми вперше з вами так мали можливість поспілкуватися. Адже до цього ми могли в Брюсселі тільки під час зустрічі Єврокомісії могли просто потиснути одне одному руку, але зараз ми змогли з вами зустрітися особисто. Тому ще раз вам дуже дякую.
Шановні журналісти, час для ваших запитань. Будь ласка, телеканал Інтер.
Good afternoon. I am Ina Kolomyets, Inner TV channel, Ukrainian TV. Mr. Fitz, what messages did you bring from China? From what is already known publicly, you had a meeting with Putin, and he offered you the energy blockade of Ukraine. What is your reaction to this proposal? This is a question for both speakers. Did you discuss the topic of energy during the meeting today, considering this case, and did you manage to find ways of cooperation between Ukraine and Slovakia as a result of your conversation today? And also, does Slovakia listen to the requirements of President Trump, which he voiced yesterday during a telephone call with European leaders to stop paying Russia for energy resources? Thank you.
Thank you for your questions, dear journalist. Again, I would like to ask you to consider our points of view on sovereignty. I would like to start with this, and I think this will be the most important. My main goal during my visit to China was not to meet with the Russian president, but my role and task was to take part in the meeting in China on the day of the victory over fascism. I would like to thank the Ukrainians, because you were also a part of the Soviet Union, which, together with China, paid the highest price for the Second World War. There were 36 million victims in China after the Second World War, and from the Japanese aggression from 1931 to 1945. This was the main reason for my visit, because I respect all the victims wherever this can be done. I was also in Normandy, in Arlington, in Swinter. I was also in Moscow, but now I am in Beijing. And on this occasion, when leaders from all over the world meet, it is a big mistake not to meet and not to talk. I had a meeting with about 12 to 13 presidents, with some formally, with others informally. Officially, I met with the Chinese president. I also met with the Vietnamese president. Officially with the Serbian president, and with the Russian President Vladimir Putin. As for Vladimir Putin, I would like to say that we talked about bilateral cooperation. Again, there can be different points of view, but we believe that the war will end, and it will end very quickly, and that it will be standardized in relation to the Russian Federation. We just want to talk in advance about the opportunities and the tasks that will be in front of us. The information that you have received, that it should be talked about some kind of energy blockade of Ukraine, is absolutely not true, and it was absolutely not the subject of talks with Vladimir Putin. First of all, we talked about bilateral cooperation between Slovakia and the Russian Federation. That is why we propose at least a meeting of the International Mixed Commission. As for other issues that you have mentioned, I said very clearly in the introductory speech that some topics related to energy. For example, I will not talk about the details now. It is already the task of our ministers of economy and energy. We really have different points of view. I said I respect the point of view of the president, but I also expect you to respect our points of view. I will not talk in detail, and I will not talk about what I heard yesterday from Mr. Trump, his official announcement, because I see it in a rather interesting context. On the one hand, we see that many European countries receive LNG. Therefore, it is really our task to find such a system that will provide each country with energy. And that each country will not choose some measures that will hinder this other country. Therefore, we want to say that there were already a lot of different announcements, and I hope that everything depends on the ministers, and I hope that after today's talks, the ministers will actually cooperate very closely on these issues.
I fully agree with the Prime Minister that we should respect the points of view of each other, even if they are different. Undoubtedly, the parade on which ballistic missiles are demonstrated is definitely not about the past, but unfortunately about the future. In my personal opinion, Ukraine has lost many millions of dollars during the fascist occupation. And it is absolutely clear that Ukraine has gone through this path. And the whole path of the occupation, Ukraine has gone through this path of struggle. Our grandfathers and great-grandfathers, they all fought fascism. And even when the occupation was complete, everyone knew that fascism was evil and it would be victorious. Undoubtedly, today we are fighting such evil, which was also present at the parade in China, and I think it is a pity. And we are fighting the current Russia's occupation. Undoubtedly, this evil will also be victorious. It is a pity that the price of this is very high. This is the lives of people, and we pay this price. Not the whole of Europe, and I do not wish them war, but I pay this price, the highest price of Ukraine. As for the energy blockade, we, by the way, did not talk about it. I do not even know. I heard from you that there was such a signal, I understand, in the media, from Putin. By the way, if you look at it logically, if a person wants to end the war, then probably she will not ask her partners or neighbors in Ukraine to make an energy blockade. Because what is it about? It means that he wants to attack our energy. He understands that we protect it as best we can, and we import it when there is a deficit, and according to the rules of the European Union, we are provided with this import emergency. And he understands that if this process is blocked, it is impossible, I think, if we live by the law, even if there is a deficit with the law in Russia. Nevertheless, today it is impossible to do it. First of all, we protect the energy system, and he constantly wants to make these blockades, but we have the right to import it today. And we are very grateful to the countries and, of course, Slovakia, thanks to whom we get this import at the time of a deficit. But the worst thing in this, I think, is that they raise questions. And it seems to me that this is the problem, that we certainly do not press Russia enough to make them think about the end of the war. The pressure can only be united by all partners of Europe and the United States of America. And what you said about President Trump, who during the call today made a very important statement with the Prime Minister of Slovakia. Yes, President Trump is absolutely right when he says that Russia must stop receiving energy resources from Russia. Europe, I'm sorry. Europe must stop receiving energy resources from Russia, which makes money on it. And at the expense of this money, this is what the President of the United States of America is fighting with Ukraine. I think that we all understand who and what to do in this situation.
Будь ласка, друге і останнє запитання. Словацька інформаційна агенція ТАСР. Четвертий ряд.
Good afternoon. I would like to ask whether it will be possible in the future to supply oil and gas through Ukraine to Slovakia. Are there other possibilities than to supply through Russia? Are there other solutions and possibilities? And did this also happen today, during the talks? And also, is there any talk about some kind of energy blockade?
I would like to ask you again, thank you for the question. There was nothing like this during the talks with President Putin. I don't want to get into a situation in which something was invented, some situation, and then they salt it for weeks. There was nothing like this during the meeting with Putin. We were talking about the possibility of bilateral cooperation, as I did with the presidents of Vietnam and China during our important meetings. If you listened to me well during my opening speech and during the first answer to the question, I mentioned that, of course, our points of view differ at some points. I said that I consider that the country wants to preserve its national interests, but at the same time, the country should respect the interests of the national interests of other countries. We talked about the attacks on Russian infrastructure. We also talked about the fact that Russian gas is not being supplied through Ukraine to Slovakia. You know that this was the subject of various political statements from both sides. When we talked about the losses for Slovakia and about the claims about military attacks on legitimate purposes, because it is primarily about the war, they also harm the Slovak Republic. We should still look at the interests of other countries, which are part of the international energy network. Mr. Journalist, we can have any statements. We can say that this one can do this and that one cannot do that. In Slovakia, there is a saying that Musaj is a great man and Nemusaj is an even greater man. But we will be very sovereign, like the Slovak Republic, and in cooperation with Ukrainian partners, we will look for solutions that will be successful for Slovak sovereignty. But we do not want to be a participant in any games. We do not want to be a participant in games where it is said that it cannot be done because it is political. We will not play such games. We will make all decisions in the sphere of energy that will be successful for Slovak political sovereignty. And I think that cooperation between Ukraine and Slovakia. We talked about energy today. As the Prime Minister said, our government will meet on October 20th. Our government will be absolutely constructive. We are ready to have joint energy projects. We are ready to supply gas and oil to Slovakia. And I told the Prime Minister, if it is not Russian gas, if it is not Russian oil, then it is Russian gas, because we are at war. As for other projects, I think that there are alternatives. We know a lot of alternatives. We are ready to work on them. To be honest, if we did not have difficulties with our energy, you know that we are connected to the European energy network. We have always had a prophecy. We have a developed nuclear network. We always had a prophecy at any time of the year. We always had a prophecy about electricity. We wanted to help. We even helped Moldova during the war, even during the strikes. We have a very good network. If it were not for the strikes, we would have helped everyone. We would have cooperated with Slovakia in this direction as well. As for Ukraine, Ukraine is responsible for the Russian strikes on our energy facilities. And it will be responsible. But we really want this war to end. But no one will just stand in the dark. Thank you.
Дякую, прес-конференція добігла кінця.